As far as an indoor air quality, nobody wants to be living in a mason jar with the lid on. I mean, we got to have some air exchange, and that's exactly what those ERVs and the HRVs are going to do. Is a phenomenal way to introduce fresh air and keep the air comfortable and clean in your home.
Welcome to the Art of Custom from Hibbs Homes. In this episode, Utah contractor Brad Hill with H&M Heating and Cooling joins us to talk HVAC. We go over the other options to give you the best air quality and comfort for your home. Enjoy.
It's a soundtrack to 1,000 summer days growing up. In fact, I can still hear my parents to this day. Close that door! We're not paying to air condition in the neighborhood. And that isn't where the great air handling drama stops. Nope. For many, it morphs into the great thermostat debate that rages between spouses and even roommates. But what if I told you there was a world where HVAC is something that just hums along in the background? The possibility of comfort and reasonable energy bills does exist. Melody, I think you saved the best for last.
You think so?
Well, it was quite the intro.
I know it's also your favorite topic, so I really knew I had to pull out the big guns here.
So the title of this episode, the last of season 6, is We're Not Cooling the Neighborhood. And of course, that was my impression of my parents back in the day, because I can hear them right now, because it seems like heating and cooling is something that everybody's talked about year after year after year. And it's taken us 6 seasons and 9 episodes, and we're finally doing a deep dive.
Absolutely. And I grew up in the 80s, 90s, and that's the roller skate outside until the street lights come on. Yeah. But we were in and out all day long, getting popsicles and water. And so
we always left the door open when we ran out.
Absolutely. So, and as someone who, I think we've talked about this before, the thermostat wars that, and so.
It seems to be, you're right about the spouses and even roommates, because I know I like it colder. My wife likes it hotter. I'm on the couch in shorts. She's wrapped up in a blanket. It just seems like that's life.
I mean, it even hits our office sometimes. Just this morning, we had a thermostat debate.
I'll be honest, I'm part of the problem because I had my window open.
You are. And it's raining outside.
So. Well, that's just me. But we've talked about the importance of HVAC in the construction process. I mean, over the years, we've taken a deep dive into the wall assembly. This season, we took a deep dive into the insulation. We've done windows, but really, it was time to give HVAC its fair due.
It is. And, based on what I've seen with our listener numbers, it seems like everybody's enjoying this.
More of a deep dive.
Dives. Yeah. So I'm excited about today's episode, even though I wasn't for a little bit.
I know. I had to talk you into it. You had to warm up to it.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of cool to it to start with. Anyway, our guest is Brad Hill with H&M Heating. They're out of northern Utah, one of our contractors there. And I love them because they really get high-performance building. They really get the importance of HVAC systems. And so without further ado, here is the interview with Brad Hill. Brad, the one thing that I've talked about over the past 6 seasons on our podcast is the importance of the wall assembly, the waterproofing, the insulation, the windows, and the HVAC system. Melody gets tired of me talking about some of these, but we've really never done a deep dive into the HVAC system. And that's where I wanted to start with you, is talk about the importance. What's the strategy behind designing the system, an HVAC system, that goes into the new home that's about to be built?
Anytime that we're talking about an HVAC system, those are the most important things of the house. The only things that get you any type of return of investment is going to be your windows, doors, insulation, and in my mind, the most important thing is your HVAC. Obviously, that's what we do. And when we're designing and going around, if you've got poor windows or if you have poor insulation, it's going to be really, really hard to moderate and keep that temperature at a very comfortable level throughout the home. All of those things definitely play a major factor in how we design and what we design. As you're probably well aware, a lot of the houses today are getting a lot of glass exposure that's creating a lot of solar heat gains. And so when we're talking about different designs, it's going to come into play with how many windows, the orientation, if the house is west facing, east facing, north facing. There's a lot of variances and a lot of different things that come into play when we're designing the HVAC system. the way the HVAC systems have evolved, even in the last 5 to 7 years with the construction components, with the way they've generated some of the closed cell foam, some of the insulation ways that they're doing it, some of the framing factors, even with the way they're gluing and nailing exteriors, the way they're installing windows, it all has a major impact on the HVAC systems as far as how we install them, how we calculate, what we calculate. And in turn, a lot of the things that have, really changed the way and the design of the HVAC systems has been in accordance with the manual J&Ds that have started to become produced for every home. And those manual J&Ds, they're going to give us a room-by-room analysis for how much heat gain we're going to have, how much heat loss we're going to have, what kind of exposure we have. It makes a big difference in how we design it. But that manual J&D and the heat loss calculation really zeroes in on getting us the correct size of furnace, because the reality is, up until 10 or 15 years ago, everybody used to just kind of throw their thumb in the air and say, hey, it's a rule of thumb that 500 square feet per ton of air, and that's what you get. But now it's become a lot more scientific, a lot more zeroed in with those insulation values, with those windows and doors and all of those different things. Now we know that, hey, this 12 by 12 room that in the years past, we used to throw 500 CFMs at it. Now all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that room really only needs 200 CFMs, which constitutes a much smaller duct run, a much smaller furnace, a much smaller air conditioner that in the end makes a huge impact on the overall end user's cost on their daily use.
And helping our listeners understand, when you're talking about manual J and manual D, that's basically the size and the design of the actual HVAC layout. All of this information has to be turned into the permitting entity that you're working with. So it really does make a difference when you're talking about things like the insulation package, the window package, the door package, because it all goes into this big formula that helps you determine, like you said, the manual J and the manual D. Talking about a little bit, you brought up something that was interesting, Brad, because when we started building 20 years ago, you're absolutely right. It used to be that the HVAC contractor would come up to me and kind of nudge me and wink and say, hey, by the way, I upsized your HVAC system just a little bit because I know you don't want any kind of phone call in the middle of the night because it's too hot or too cold. But to your point, those days are gone. It's much more scientific now.
Absolutely. And that's when we're talking about, going back to your comment about the manual J and the manual D. The J side of it is your heat loss calculation that basically just, it gives us an overall how much heat or how many BTUs we need for the home. And then the D side is the duct design and to determine how much flow, what size of duct, how many CFMs, and it really kind of calibrates everything in so that we're not throwing like a 5-ton furnace in with massive heat ducts and massive runs just to kind of put a Band-Aid on it. It's like, hey, this is a lot more scientific, a lot more specific on what we're looking at, what we're doing.
So let's talk a little bit about the equipment. And I want to do a little bit of a deep dive here to help people understand that if you're building a custom home, and in some regards, if you're building a production home with a good reputable builder, I'm sure you'll have some options there. Where do you tell people to at least start today to provide them with just a good system, an efficient system? Let's start with what you recommend as just a good system.
Kind of the base entry level standard is going to be a 95% efficient single speed furnace. That's a relatively decent furnace. Nobody's going to really go completely wrong with it, but there are some benefits and advantages to using more of your high end, like your variable speeds and some of the other options on the market. But, the industry standard right now is going to be just a single speed, 95% efficient furnace. Kind of jumping in a little bit deeper into how the furnaces function, you kind of have 3 tiers, so to speak, of the furnace side of it. You have a single speed, a 2-speed, and a variable speed. Or, some people like to call them a modulating furnace. The single speed, basically, when it turns on, you get 100% of what that furnace has to offer. It opens up the gas, gives you all the gas, gives you all the blower, gives you everything that the furnace can produce. Like I said, it's a fairly good system, but they're not completely energy efficient, just in the sense that they use all the energy. They don't ramp up or down. They just give you everything. And then as you jump into like a 2-speed furnace, and it depends on, there's 2 different ways you can set it up. The easiest way to explain it is it has a built-in algorithm into the control board, and it runs for the first 7 minutes on a low speed. And on that low speed, it runs a low blower motor or slower blower motor, and it runs only about half of your gas, therefore making it to where we're not running near the amount of energy. And a lot of times, that's all you need for the first 7 minutes is it will satisfy the temperature in the home with that low speed and that low heat. And then if it doesn't satisfy that temperature after 7 minutes, it kicks into the high stage and it remains in high stage until it satisfies the thermostat. And then jumping into your variable speed, it's going to be kind of one and the same. It's going to start out on a low stage, which is a lot of times on the variable speeds or the modulating furnaces, you don't even know they're running if you're standing in front of them. That's how quiet and how low of a blower motor and low of flame you're using. And same thing, it depends on how it's set up. Typically, they have a default that it's going to go into the algorithm of the control board, and it's going to be like a 7 to 8 minute delay on the different stages. And you can control that in like your variable speeds or your modulating furnaces through the actual thermostat and set them up for how long you want each stage to run. So on a modulating furnace, it'll start out and it'll run for the first 4 minutes on a low fire, and it'll just be a very low roar. After the 4 minutes, it'll kick up to a low medium, and then a medium stage, and then a medium high until it gets up to the high stage. And the purpose for the modulating furnace or the variable speed furnaces, it's to keep the exact amount of energy that's required to go into the home to keep it comfortable and keep it at temperature, rather than like a 95% efficient furnace, single speed, that's just going to kick on and give you all of the energy, kick on, kick off. We're going to use the exact amount of energy that's required to heat and cool the home. The other huge benefit to doing a variable speed furnace is just that. It runs a lot more, but it's costing you far fewer dollars in fuel and far fewer dollars in your electrical side of it. But it's also keeping that air overturning in the home. So the variable speeds do add a level of comfort to the home. It's also going to add a level of noise control, because it's not like your 95 single stage that's going to kick on and just give you everything full blower, full gas. It's going to be a lot more quiet, because most of the time, the goal with a variable speed is to never really hit that high stage, except for when you have, like a big party going on, or somebody left the door open, or, extreme heat for a couple hours of the day or something like that. But the concept is that they're really running a lot longer durations, but running on much lower speeds and much lower gas consumptions.
So we're big proponents, obviously, of a minimum 2-stage, and quite frankly, we prefer the modulating furnaces as well. So I'm glad you did a really nice job, Brad, in helping us understand the differences there. I'd like to let our listeners have an idea of some of the cost differences, because I know what they are, but we're really not talking a huge price difference when you go to a 2-stage or a variable. And in my mind, it's worth it. So help our listeners understand what the cost differences typically are.
When you go from a 2-speed to a variable speed or a full modulating, there is some cost implications that come with that. And the reason why is when we get into the variable speed, and again, I don't want to get on a soapbox with the variable speed, but I'm a huge proponent of it because it changes the whole way your house functions. Yes, you have a variable speed gas valve, you have a modulating inducer motor, you have a variable speed blower. So you do have some components that are pretty substantial, different dollars, but it also has a different controller that's going to go with your variable speeds. The reason why it has a different controller, and they actually get away from calling it a thermostat and they go to a controller, because that thermostat is going to be your brain of the system. And so once you get into the variable speed systems, they function substantially different in the fact that you have an outdoor temperature sensor and you have your thermostat or your indoor controller on the wall. Now, what that's going to do is it's kind of thinking for you the whole way through. That controller or that thermostat is most commonly known to people. They're going to just say, oh yeah, that's the thermostat, it's turning the temperature up and down. Well, what it's doing is it's monitoring the outdoor temperatures, the indoor temperatures, and it's configuring different algorithms that are saying, okay, yesterday when it was 95 degrees outside, we needed to run on high stage for 75% of the day. We don't want to run at 75% of the day on high stage, so it kicks into a low speed at an earlier time. So a lot of times with the modulating or variable speed furnaces, people will go and fill their air vent, and they're going to be like, there's air coming out of the vent, but my satisfied temperature says 72 degrees and it's at 72 degrees. Why is it blowing air? It's kind of outthinking you or doing the thinking for you, and it's saying, hey, I can see what the outdoor temperature is doing. I know what that outdoor temperature looked like yesterday, and I know how it's going to affect the indoor temperature today. So we kind of stay ahead of it to run on a lower speed and use less energy. And it's doing the same thing on heating and cooling. And that's why a lot of times when we talk variable speed, I love to pair the variable speed or the modulating furnace with a modulating air conditioner, because then they work in conjunction with each other, and they really do a phenomenal job of keeping that temperature at a very, very even temperature. And you don't have a lot of those temperature swings where one room's hot, one room's cold. It really helps balance that out as far as your overall feel and temperature in the home.
Anything else you want to mention while we're talking about air conditioners that you think would be important for our listeners to understand?
A lot of times with the air conditioner, again, the modulating air conditioner is by far the best air conditioner on the market because it's, of the efficiency. Also, it's a much substantially quieter unit. But when we're talking about air conditioners, there are certain scenarios in certain locations, and a lot of that needs to be taken into consideration when you're selecting an air conditioner. Pretty much almost anywhere in Utah, we can justify or solidify that a variable speed furnace has substantial value and is worth having. Now, an air conditioner, it's a little different scenario. And the reason why I say that is it just depends on where everything is being built. Because if you're up in the higher elevations, 7,000 feet, a lot of times that air conditioner, it's only coming on a couple months out of the year, and you're still getting so cool at night that it's really hard to justify doing a variable speed air conditioner because there's no real value in it. Now, when you get into the Salt Lake Valley or your St. George areas or any of those areas, you could even argue the point for the last 10 years with how hot it's been getting in Summit County, Wasatch County, the Park City region. Same thing, you can argue the point that variable speeds are a tremendous value. To go to a variable speed furnace, you're going to add about $3,000 in cost difference between a single speed or a two-stage and going to a full modulating system. And you're going to have a similar value in going from a 14 SEER to, say, a 19 SEER variable speed air conditioner. Most of the areas, it's going to be about a 5 to 7 year return of investment on those variable speed systems.
And I think that's reasonable because as a high performance builder, a lot of times clients come to us and ask for our recommendation. And my recommendation, honestly, is anything that can pay you back within 5 to 7 years, you should seriously consider it. Now, most people, if they're buying a home, I think studies have shown most people are going to live in that home 7, maybe 10 years. But custom home buyers are going to be living in their home much longer. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of the modulating air conditioning units as well as furnaces. So let me ask your opinion, Brad, on heat pumps. I know they're gaining a lot of traction in various parts of the country. It seems like a lot of the major utility companies are offering rebates related to heat pumps. Talk about what your thoughts are.
Heat pumps are gaining a lot of traction nationwide. They've become better and better and more energy efficient. For a lot of years, they struggled in certain regions because of the fact that the heat pump, they start to lose efficiency at about 40 degrees outdoor ambient air temperature. So in a lot of these super cold climates, the heat pumps get very difficult to justify their existence. But having said that, they've immensely improved on the heat pumps to where now they have heat pumps, like some of your Mitsubishis, your Samsungs, and that's getting into more of the ductless split heat pumps, but they're running down to minus 20 degrees and still maintaining efficiency. So now all of a sudden they become a huge value or a huge asset, even in these colder climates. So again, I think it just depends on the application, but the heat pumps are gaining a lot of traction. And yes, they're becoming very attractive just because of the rebates that are available.
Let's talk a little bit about zoning, because it seems like if you ever wanted to have a couple of different zones in the house, you always had to have two separate systems almost operating your zones, whereas we have used quite successfully, both in our St. Louis market and the Park City market, automated dampers, so we can have one system, a well-sized system that can properly handle different zones within the house with automated dampers.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, because obviously you have a lot of different desires or temperature needs in a home, whether it's a master bedroom from a kitchen area. A lot of times the sleeping quarters want to be a little bit cooler than the living quarters. And so absolutely it makes a lot of sense to have different zones and zonability to have different temperatures throughout the home. Going back to the discussion we had in the beginning with the manual D, that's where everything just becomes critical, because if you can picture a furnace and if it's producing a 20-inch round cylinder of air, and all of a sudden we have a zone that's only using 5 inches of that air, where does the rest of the air go? So that's where it becomes very complicated. But if it's zoned correctly, I'm a huge proponent of zoning. I zone my own personal house just for that reason, because you're saving yourself the extra piece of equipment. Now you only have one furnace versus two furnaces, but yet you have zone control and you have different areas that you can control. Zoning is a huge aspect in designing a home to make sure that you have not only the comfort levels you want throughout the home, but again, if you have a home that has one area that's west facing that has a lot of glass, all of a sudden you have two different climates. And a lot of times the home doesn't constitute needing two separate systems. But zoning absolutely makes sense. And to your point, I think zoning is a great way to gain control of the home and make sure that you have different temperatures throughout the home to keep that home comfortable in different areas at different times and the different, building components or structure components that go into it.
You've used the word comfort several times, and Brad, I appreciate that because that's what our goal is when we're talking to our clients about how we build and how we want to help design their HVAC system. Indoor air quality, in my mind, is part of that overall comfort, though, if you will, and that's why the filters, you really need to take a look at the filters that you're going to be installing into the system, correct?
Absolutely. And to that point, Kim, I mean, as far as like us and the way that we install every single system, we start every single house, regardless of whether it's a track home or an ultra high-end custom home. They're all going to have a very high-end media filtration system on them. If you don't have that type of a filtration system, you're really doing yourself an injustice by not creating that indoor air quality and also protecting your system. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the HVAC system is a huge chunk of your budget and a huge investment. That filtration system is going to not only help with your indoor air quality, but it's going to help protect that equipment as well to extend the longevity and life expectancy of the equipment. Therefore, I don't ever install a system, and nor would I ever recommend anyone to install a system without a very nice high-end media filtration system.
And those systems really are not big cost adders.
No, they're not a huge add. I mean, the biggest difference is that the filter cost is going to be a little bit more. But again, keep in mind, those filters are lasting you 6 months, where with the 1-inch filter, you should be changing them out depending on your traffic and foot traffic and your outdoor surroundings. If you're doing landscaping or if there's a house being built next door to you. A lot of times with those 1-inch thick filters, they should be changed out every 30 days. The longest that we ever recommend is 90 days on a 1-inch thick filter, where with the media filtration system, we recommend every 6 months, but we've seen people push them 8, 10, 12 months. And again, it just depends on your outside, how many times that door is opening and closing, and how many people are in and out of the house, and what kind of surfaces you have, whether it's carpet or whether you have hardwood floors or tile or whatever you have as your surfaces. It makes a big difference on how much airborne contaminants are being filtered through the system. But those media filters, for the indoor air quality that provides, it's one of those things that, like I said, I won't install a system without a good high-end media filtration system on it. For the minuscule cost that you're adding to put that in, it's dollars well spent.
We're talking with Brad Hill of H&M Heating and Cooling in Northern Utah, talking about the comfort of a home. And one of the things that I appreciate about you and your team, you do things and you want to do things right. And that includes a little bit of a different ducting system. So tell us about what you use and why.
The reason that it initially started was with the version 3 and Energy Star home ratings that people started to require. They started doing duct testing. And the whole thing is duct testing is a phenomenal thing, and it's a great way to go through and test the overall integrity of the system and how much heat loss you have or how much air loss and leakage you have in your system. And with the conventional metal system, everybody's done metal systems for years and years, and we've done metal systems as well, and we still offer metal systems. But the trick to it is everything with the metal system has a button lock or a snap lock seam to it. And the thing is every single thing can leak. And then you have a shiplap joint or an S and drive joint that the duct connects each length together to go throughout the home. And a lot of times those lengths will land like directly underneath a floor joist, making it very, very difficult or impossible to completely seal that joint with your mastic or your duct sealer. And so that's where we started running into a lot of these questions is how do we get to less and less leakage? How do we get to, initially it started out as like a 9% leakage. Then it went down to an 8%, and now it's a 6% leakage. And it became very, very challenging to hit that. And so that's when we looked at this product, insulated fiber duct board. And the fiber duct board, we can seal it 100% and get everything sealed extremely tight. And not only does it seal up tighter, but you have a much better overall system because you have no heat loss, no heat gain. You don't have your expansion, contraction. It makes the system much less noisy and just makes for an overall better delivery of your air that makes an overall better comfort level of the home.
And you mentioned just a moment ago sealing your ductwork, and you used the term mastic. I believe if the codes haven't taken us in the direction of that being mandatory, it's something that all of our listeners should absolutely consider. Talk about how you guys seal up all the ductwork and the system and the importance of making sure that it is sealed up.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And it's critical because, and the numbers sound astronomical, but when you go into a home that's 15 or 20 years old, that's just a standard metal system that didn't get sealed up well, or, before the time of understanding the importance of sealing a system, a lot of those systems can be literally upwards of 40% leakage. And I know those numbers sound astronomical, but that's the reality of a lot of that air is leaking out and it's not getting delivered air into the home. It's not getting delivered into the room where you designed or where you wanted it to go. And so that's where, like Energy Star and some of these different programs have really pushed the envelope to sealing the duct and getting a much tighter system to getting that air delivery down. And like I say, when you start talking about 6%, a lot of these systems are very, very challenging to get to that level. And if you go through and you seal it really well, a lot of times you can get to that 6 or 8%. But we've taken things one step further, and we've offered a product now that's an AeroSeal product that basically goes in and injects into the system, and it seals that system. Most of our systems we're trying to get or maintain under a 2% leakage, so that system is extremely tight. So when we get that manual J&D and that design of that system, and we say, hey, we're going to get 110 CFMs to that room, we're going to make sure we're getting all 110 CFMs to that room or that area. We don't want to see leakage. We don't want anything other than the air to go where we're designing it to go, to make sure that we're keeping those levels of that home comfortable and making sure that we're hitting all those heat loss, heat gain points, and making sure that the home is basically spot on as to how we design it.
Brad, ever since the pandemic, one thing people have really been focused on is indoor air quality. There are options out there such as air scrubbers. There's also ultraviolet lights within the duct system. What do you recommend people who are really focused on indoor air quality? What do you think they should look toward?
The product that we really support and stand behind a lot is the REME, REME, air scrubber, air purifier with the UV light. It's really cutting down on a lot of your pollutions and pollutants that are in the air, as well as a lot of your airborne illnesses and germs and sicknesses. They do a phenomenal job. And absolutely with the pandemic, they became very, very difficult to get, just because all of a sudden everybody said with this pandemic, with the coronavirus, everybody wanted to do whatever they could to try and control that indoor air quality. They couldn't hardly keep them on the shelf just because everybody wanted them and they were in such a high demand. They do a great job, especially, if you're susceptible to like allergies or illnesses and sicknesses, cold and flu season, stuff like that. That's when a lot of that indoor air quality products really come into play and make a huge difference in how the house is and how it performs. And along with when we're talking about that, humidifiers, I think needs to be a discussion that comes into your indoor air quality. Not only does it help with acclimating your hardwood floors, your cabinetry, but, typically when anybody gets sick, what's the first thing they do is, throw a little humidifier in their room to try and get that moisture and the extra humidity into the room. The whole home humidifiers, especially with the new steam humidifiers that have been on the market for, the last 8 or 10 years, they're phenomenal in the amount of moisture content that they can put into the home. It just makes a huge difference in illnesses, sicknesses, your overall indoor air quality with backed up with an air scrubber and a UV light. Absolutely a great thing, and I highly recommend that they go into every home.
We've been talking a lot about how tight we're building homes because we use foam insulation. We're using, just a lot of products that helps us lower our air exchange per hour inside a house. You've been talking about duct leakage of less than 2%. So these are very tight homes we're building. So we have to be making sure that we're bringing in fresh air. Lots of different ways to bring in fresh air. There's some simple systems. There's some ERVs, which is an energy recovery ventilator. There's an HRV, a heat recovery ventilator. What do you tell folks who are having a very tight home built? What is your preference and what are some of the benefits of each?
The only difference in the ERV and the HRV, and HRV is going to extract some of the moisture out of the air. So a lot of times people, depending on what they're trying to do or what their goals are, like in the summer months, a lot of times if you're in a really moist area or a humid area, like in the South, a lot of times they're going to want to run more of the HRV, where in some of your drier climates, the ERV makes more sense. But again, a lot of that becomes personal preference as far as what you're trying to do with moisture and how you're trying to control your moisture in your home. But as an overall whole, absolutely, we install a lot of ERVs and HRVs. And it just depends on, what you're looking for. But as far as an indoor air quality, nobody wants to be living in a mason jar with the lid on. I mean, we got to have some air exchange. And that's exactly what those ERVs and the HRVs are going to do. It's going to keep that air fresh and keep your indoor air quality extremely high. It's filtering that air. It's slowly exchanging the air in the home. phenomenal way to, introduce fresh air and keep the air comfortable and clean in your home.
Any thoughts on thermostats? I know that there's some pretty technical ones out there.
Thermostats, in today's market, it seems like everybody wants to have it at their tip of their fingers. They want to have control of it. So a lot of things have gone to a wireless controllable thermostat. The thermostat that we really like and that we're a huge proponent of is the ecobee thermostat. The ecobee just seems to have a little bit better controls. It has a few more options on them. They seem to give you really good Wi-Fi control, have the ability to, set different timers to have it cycle the air. So even if you're not running the furnace at all, it can turn the air on and just circulate the air for, 5 minutes out of the hour, 20 minutes out of the hour, whatever that selection looks like. Same thing for a lot of people that travel a lot or they want to really try and control that temperature up and down. The Wi-Fi access has become a huge key in how people like to function and how they want to see their homes function.
If we have listeners out there who are planning to build a home, but their builder hasn't engaged them in a conversation about HVAC, is there a comfortable way? I mean, do you think they should just bring it up and say, hey, I really want to learn more about the systems that are going into the house and things like that? Or
Absolutely. I think that it's key to a homeowner to, one, do their own research and know kind of what their expectations are. And two, absolutely to talk to the builder to make sure that, they're getting a good quality product and a good quality installation. It's the same thing, after the house is completed and built, the last thing you want to have is an uncomfortable home. So you want to make sure that it's done and done right and make sure that you're asking the questions, hey, how is this system going to be sealed? What kind of furnaces are we going to be using? Even jump into maybe, hey, can I look at the manual J&D to make sure that we've got the airflows and everything's kind of designed correctly to make sure. And I mean, to a lot of layman terms, you're not going to understand that manual J&D, but there is a lot of information that you can go through and understand that system to know what you're getting, to make sure that you're going to have a system that you're going to be happy with and comfortable with in the end.
Brad Hill with H&M Heating in northern Utah. You have been just the perfect guest to help us really understand everything we need to know to make sure our HVAC system is comfy and efficient. So thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Melody, did you think that HVAC could really be that fun and interesting?
It was very technical. I'm not going to lie. There were a lot of things that kind of went over my head, but...
well, that's why I think it's fun.
Yes, well, got to jump up and grasp them.
But it's a very important subject. I'm glad that Brad was able to participate with us because it's something that there are many options. There's many ways to heat and cool a house, but comfort, indoor air quality, it's so important that I'm glad you finally gave in and let us do that segment.
I know. Listeners, you can thank me later.
We've had a fun season.
We have.
And you said earlier at the beginning of this episode that it appears the listeners have really appreciated some of the deep dives that we've done.
Absolutely. I mean, the planning process also, it just seems like everybody's liking the more technical details. I know everybody really enjoyed the design season. If you guys haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, we did an episode where we went around the house room to room and talked about design aspects. And
do you remember the season?
Season
off the top of your head?
4.
I was going to say, I think it's season 4. Okay.
And so you can go back and listen to season 4. It seems like we kind of did nice work with the structural part of the house this season.
You know, that's where my heart lies. As much as I love the design aspect, my eyes rolled a little bit. Although I do appreciate it because it's the finishes and the selections that everybody sees, and that's the beauty of each home. Man, oh man, though, you've got to start with your term, good bones. And if you start with those good bones, it's going to make the finish of that house even more beautiful because your heating and cooling bills are lower, the durability of your house is there, the comfort, the clean indoor air quality. It's all like a big package. So it's been a fun season, and I appreciate you've done a great job as the producer and co-host. Thank you very much. Love the guests, love the topics, and you've done a great job making sure that we had a lot of good information on show notes. So we appreciate everything you've done for that.
Well, thank you. And thank you for pushing me out of my comfort zone, my comfort zoned HVAC.
Good one.
Yes.
So season 7 is coming up next we have to sit down and start planning it. We certainly, throughout the next coming months, we'll have some bonus episodes from time to time and let people know what's going on within the construction industry. Obviously, if there's anything major, we'll sit down and talk about it just so everybody has kind of an understanding. I think the last thing I'd like to leave our listeners with is just a little bit of advice. I know interest rates are out of control right now. They just haven't settled. Word on the street is they eventually will. If you're looking to build a home, it's still a great time to do it. All the labor prices, material prices have kind of settled. They're not going to go down. Everybody thinks I'm going to wait it out. Well, it's been 2 years and those prices haven't gone down. So it really is a good time to think about designing and building your dream home. When interest rates do back off a little bit, you can refinance. So that's just a little bit of advice that I have. And the other advice is use us as a resource. We love to hear from our listeners. Be happy to provide any information we can about the building process. If you're looking for a builder, I always say start with the local Home Builders Association webpage. It's just a really good way to find a reputable builder and one that takes the industry very seriously.
I also want to offer a piece of advice based on some things that we've talked about this season, but also what I've been learning just recently with what's been going on with our clients coming in the door. Mm-hmm. I have noticed that a lot of people are maybe not going with their gut instinct with their builder, the person that they would trust. And, and then they're coming back to us.
3 times, I think, just this summer alone.
I know. Then my takeaway from that is that going with your gut instinct and not just those dollars and cents. And, we talk a lot about competitive bids, but go back and listen to a couple of the episodes where we interview other builders. So you can see kind of the difference between, we talk a lot about the way that we do business, but, learn about these other builders through the podcast so that when you sit down to the table, you have a lot more information and background as you're doing those interviews.
And you bring up a very good point. Kind of trust your own instinct as well. It's very important. It's a long process. By the time you design the house, build the house, and have warranty, you're talking more than 2 years. And so you want it to be a good experience, and you really want to hire someone that you trust and that you feel like you can develop a great relationship with. Kelly Day, who's one of our Park City clients, was talking about that in one of our earlier episodes about building from afar. Mm-hmm. And she was talking about the importance to her of finding a builder where they could develop a friendship, a relationship. Right. And I think that's important. I think that's critical. And it's one of the things that you really should look into and delve deeply into when you're interviewing builders is, could we develop that type of trustful relationship for a couple of years? Because it's the biggest purchase you're ever going to make, likely, and you just want to make sure it's a good experience.
Well, and if one of the builders comes back, it's your favorite builder, but they have the higher price, don't be afraid to ask them why. Mm-hmm. Because there are things that are built into builders' quotes that you may not understand, that Builder C doesn't have in their quote. And so, if it's somebody that you like and that you trust, just feel comfortable going and asking them, hey, what's built into this, so that I understand, because you're coming out higher. And your builder's not going to come at you with in a defensive mode. No. They're going to come to you and say, okay, well, let's look at this.
Let's look at it. And a lot of it could be also in the allowances as far as the selections.
Yeah.
Because there's a totally different way that builders look at it. We look at it from a realistic standpoint. What have Hibbs clients spent in the past for virtually the same size or same price home?
Right.
Now, those numbers are going to be higher than what industry standards are. And if you have one builder using higher allowances and another builder is using more industry standard, which are going to be lower, you can come up with tens of thousands, if not even hundreds of thousands of dollars differences just between the two bids. So that's such a great piece of advice. Yep. If there's a builder that you feel comfortable with, feel comfortable asking them to help you understand why there is that price difference.
Well, and even the lumber package, you guys were talking, about the 2x6 versus 2x4 construction.
Yeah.
When somebody's going through and pulling together an estimate, they're not necessarily going through your plans in detail. They're pulling numbers, and so find out, what are the building materials? We talked about it this season, and you can maybe make some more informed decisions.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because just a real quick story. I was talking with our lumber supplier in the St. Louis area this morning, and we were talking about subfloor materials. Because again, we as a builder are trying to build the best possible home. And so we were talking about, especially with winter right around the corner, we want to make sure that our subfloor material can withstand the snow and melting snow and ice and things like that. And so we talked about one product versus another product, and that one product product, which is going to give you a much better performance of your floor system with snow and ice on it, is about $3,000 more expensive in your lumber package. Well, if you do $3,000 there, and then like we do with our heating and cooling systems, if we do a variable speed or a modulating speed furnace, there's another $3,000. So, if you do an upgraded insulation package like we do, there's another $3,000. So all of a sudden, if you're comparing builder to builder, we're doing things to build a much better home.
Right.
And it's not adding a lot to the cost, but it's adding enough that it might be a difference with another builder. So to your point, feel comfortable asking your builder to discuss why his or her bid might be a little bit higher than the other builder, and do a little bit of homework, because you can do a truly apples to apples comparison and then find out if there really is a price difference or not. And
one other resource that you can use for questions, obviously we would love for you to email us at podcast@hibbshomes.com with anything. You can also go on to Reddit. We are very active on Reddit in the home building subreddit, and we go through and answer questions about things that we've brought up this season. I mean, there are people who will say, why am I not able to use these faucets I found on Wayfair? Well, there's a good reason for that. And so we'll jump in where we can. So you can, find some of our old answers in there and, ask some questions of your own and get a wider community response as well. We love that subreddit.
Great advice. It's been a fun season. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Season 6 is in the books. We thank all of our listeners. It's been a pleasure, hopefully giving you some guidance and some advice for your once-in-a-lifetime fun journey of building your dream home. And we certainly look forward to having everyone join us coming up again when we launch Season 7.
For more information, visit www.artofcustompodcast.com or find us on Facebook and LinkedIn as The Art of Custom. Be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes, and please rate and review. The Art of Custom is produced by Hug Monster Sound with original music by Adam Frickfordine. Thanks for listening.